Shout out to G-Man Boxing.
Alright, this weekend we had Logan Paul take on Floyd Mayweather in an exhibition, which was pay-per-view on Sky Sports. I didn't pay for it, didn't watch it. I watched highlights of it the next day. I was more interested in the Hurd Arias fight on the undercard. That fight intrigued me from the get-go because I knew Arias was kind of fringe world level, but I knew Hurd, I've said this for a while, yeah, he won a unified title at 154, but Hurd I've never rated. I think all he is big. He has no skill that I can see other than his size. And even though he looked bigger than Arias, who's a natural middleweight, he still he showed all the flaws that we've seen from him in the past. But anyway, I'll not talk about that. We'll talk about that in a separate video or a live stream. Logan Paul versus Floyd Mayweather. I've seen a lot of people up in arms saying it's disgraced and that Floyd is tarnishing his legacy. I personally don't think he is. I think that you could look at several fighters, great fighters, all-time greats, who've had, the end of their careers have not been as good as their prime. Like, look at Roberto Duran, near the end, he lost a couple of fights to guys he shouldn't have lost. He was up at a higher weight. But we still look at Duran as an all-time great. The same with Evander Holyfield, nearly 10 losses. I don't think he's done that. I think that it does put into context what the sport of boxing, what's going on in it in terms of not getting the big fights made. I think that if boxing was in a better place where we were getting the big fights regularly, then I don't think any of these YouTubers would be feeling the need to go into it, or if they did, it wouldn't certainly be getting as much publicity as it is. I mean, you're getting people on boxing scene talking about this. You're getting, Michael Benson, whose Twitter page I do like. I really do. He is very good for reporting news. He reports on every little thing that Logan Paul or whatever the hell their names are, Jake Paul, Logan Paul, whichever one of them it is, says, and it's just like, oh, really? I'd like to know more about, how, who AJ is going to fight next, if it's going to be Usyk or if it's going to be Dillian Whyte. If you have that perfectly, put it on Twitter. But why are you putting up videos of Logan Paul or whichever one of the goddamn brothers is? I couldn't tell them apart, to be honest, because I don't pay any attention to any of that. But seriously, I would rather know about real boxing news, as in, pro fighter versus pro fighter, not what two YouTubers are saying with regards to this. That being said, as I said at the start of this video, boxing is in such a poor place with big fights not being made, and fighters saying, or not say fighters, boxing fans saying, well, Anthony Joshua shouldn't fight Alexander Usyk next. It's not a big money fight. It's not. It's like, it's the outside of Fury. That's the best fight for AJ in terms of risk, because it is a risk. All right, people say, no, Usyk is a terrible fight. He's not a name. He's not a draw. He's not look good at heavyweight. Put him in with Dillian Whyte. He's a bigger name and he's more dangerous. Not in my opinion, it's not. Dillian Whyte has been knocked out by AJ before, years ago, and I think he'll get knocked out by him again. Yes, I'll admit, he is a bigger draw, but who gives a you-know-what if it's a bigger draw? Usyk is mandatory challenger for the WBO World Heavyweight title. That is a very good fight. It's the fight I personally really want to see. Why aren't we getting that? Errol Spence, Terence Crawford. 4 years in the making, we're probably never going to see that fight. Because cross the street, who cares? We want to see the best fight the best. The best at 147, in my opinion, Errol Spence, Terence Crawford. Why aren't we seeing that fight? In the early 2000s, in the 90s, yes, some of the fights did take longer to happen. I will admit that. Obviously we went to see Holyfield Tyson 5 years before we actually did it, or 5 years before we actually did it. They do take a bit of time to make, but they get made. The fights in this era, they're just not being made. So I think that's not helping the sport of boxing. It really isn't. And I'm sure there are other examples. I'm probably forgetting a few. But I'm sure there's other examples of good fights that we want to see. I mean, for me, the Errol Spence, Terence Crawford thing really is ridiculous. I mean, cast your minds back to 2 years ago, where Al Heyman even said, I think publicly admitted, or well, not Al Heyman, I think PBC publicly admitted that they were no longer recognising the WBO title as a legitimate title. Why was that? Errol Spence at the time, he had the IBF and he was going into a unification with Sean Porter. Terence Crawford was WBO champion. But now they're happy to put the Charlo Castano fight on as a unification when he has the WBO 154-pound title, and obviously he's PBC, obviously, but still they're happy to do it when it suits them. But back 2 years ago, they said they didn't recognize it. I mean, it's these kind of things that are happening in boxing are just absolutely pathetic in terms of, you know, getting the big fights being made. So fights like this, these YouTubers are coming in because there's no real proper. You could say, gee, there's been great fights this year. Yeah, there's been very good fights this year, but I'm talking about the absolute mega fights. You know, when do we get them? We don't really get them anymore these days. You know, AJ Fury, that was they kind of dangled the carrot with us with that. They kind of teased that the announcement's coming. Oh, this is, we're excited. We're like, oh shit, you know, AJ Fury, yeah, no. And you just think, what the hell? You know, that's where you're just thinking, like, it's a pain sometimes being a fan of boxing. And you know me, I do not like to come across as negative at all. That's not my personality. I'm not a downer or anything like that. You know, I'm not someone who's going to be like, oh, this is shit. This is not me. You know, I like to look at the bright side of everything. You know, I'm the sort of person where, you know, if I was, and touch wood, thankfully I've never have, but if I was in a car crash and the car was wrote off, I'd be like, well, it could have been worse. At least no one else was involved, and at least, you know, etc. Stuff like that. I always have a good way of looking at the glass is half full type of character. But with the way boxing is, and fans complain, and these YouTubers coming into boxing, well, yeah, they're coming into boxing because boxing hasn't. We are literally, where's the massive marquee fights? You know, you have the boxing journalists who are reporting on Logan Paul, KSI, Jake Paul, etc., Tommy Fury versus Jake Paul, because there's nothing else, realistically speaking, you know. And then you have people say, oh, we don't want to see AJ Usyk. Based off of what? Based off of what? You know, and, you know, you look at, you know, I remember, was it Rigondeaux when he was fighting Lomachenko, the fact that, you know, people were saying, oh, Rigondeaux had to move up, you know, 3 weight classes because no one was fighting because he's deemed boring. Yeah, he's not the most entertaining guy, but, like, there was fights down there and they just didn't get made, and Bob Arum didn't want it. It's just like, what the hell? You know, that's the way boxing's kind of gone now. And when KSI and Jake Paul or Logan Paul? Logan Paul, I think it was, fought, and that was under pro rules. You had Billy Joe Saunders on the undercard as well as Devin Haney. And I kind of thought to myself, and at the end of the day, both guys didn't do themselves any favours with their performances respectively on those cards, because you had the eyes of the world watching you, and I suppose actually you could say they didn't. It was what the promoter should have really thought about it as well, Eddie Hearn, in a sense that, you know, you should have put them in just easy fights. You know, fights that were, because Billy Joe fought that Argentinian guy who nearly beat him, and Haney had a stinker, whereas those guys could have got, if they went in there and just blew those opponents out of there, they could have actually gained a lot of fans from it, because it was just pure as casuals who were watching that, but still, nevertheless, they were watching it. You know, you should impress on that. I'm not really, like, I didn't watch the Logan Paul Floyd Mayweather fight. No intention of watching it. I watched a few highlights of seeing Logan Paul slapping Floyd Mayweather, which was funny. It was, I don't want to say slapping, it wasn't like, you know, a slap don't touch me. It was a case of, you know, that's how he was throwing the punches, which I did laugh at. But at the end of the day, what can you do? Can you blame YouTubers for getting involved? Like, can you blame these journalists? Well, yes and no, but can you blame them for, you know, posting whatever they say online and say, oh, look what Jake Paul said, look what Logan Paul said, when we're just not getting anything else from, you know, the top fighters? You know, when we're not getting the big fights made, when we're having some fans saying, oh, we don't want to see that fight, why should AJ fight Usyk? Well, he's mandatory. You know, just chucking that out there. You know, he is mandatory at the end of the day. That's my thoughts on that. Just said I'd make a video on it. Whether, you know, if you agree, let me know. If you disagree, let me know. If you think that these fights are just apparent, they shouldn't be happening left, right, and centre, or they shouldn't be happening period and apparent, let me know. Are you like me, thinking, do you know what? I don't watch them, but yes, it's bringing some attention onto boxing, I'll admit that, but I would rather we get attention on boxing for the big fights, that we just don't seem to get anymore these days. You know, I'm just thinking, when's the last real big, you know, event, big fight? AJ Ruiz, because of the drama, But we forget the first fight wasn't. The first fight was seen as a walkover. The drama in the rematch, yes. Wilder Fury, the rematch, possibly. But if you're talking about real big, boom fights, you probably say Canelo Triple G. Unless I'm missing something, you probably say Canelo Triple G was the last one. And even then, 2016, would that have been a better time to have it? I know Team Canelo waited a year after the Jacobs fight and then fought Triple G, but would that be the last one? I don't know. I'm going to call it here. Let me know in the comment section what you think of the whole event, Paul versus Mayweather, and do you think we've seen the last of this? I seriously doubt it. Well, I think they are doing more of them. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, what you think. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash the like button, as I always say. Smash the like button, hashtag GMASRocks, all that good stuff. Subscribe, of course, if you haven't already. If you could, click the notification bell, helps your boy out. For now, lads and lasses, I'll talk to you. Peace.